Hey everyone, thanks again for joining up with me tonight for another round of WOW Live, Word on Wednesdays Live. We're going to continue with the subject of dinosaurs yet again this evening. Last week I ended the lesson with a picture of the Paluxy riverbed in Glen Rose, Texas. And there were all kinds of dinosaur tracks there in the picture, and there's also a lot of dinosaur tracks elsewhere around that area. There's even a state park, a dinosaur track state park in Texas, right in that area, and possibly at the Paluxy riverbed outside of Glen Rose, perhaps there is a set there of human tracks along with all the dinosaur tracks. Now, if this is true, that there are human tracks along with dinosaur tracks in this rock bed, well, that means that humans and dinosaurs live together at the same time, because the trackways were formed at the same time. And that's the subject we want to delve into a little bit tonight in this particular area. We are going to look at this riverbed in Glen Rose, Texas, and I'm showing you here a map so that the next time you're driving by Glen Rose, just southwest there of Fort Worth, you'll know where you're at. You can go down by Glen Rose and then stop in. And here's a closer look then. If you decide to stop in, I want to give you some landmarks you can look for. Now you can see the Paluxy River there, which I've conveniently pointed out for you on the aerial view here with that orange arrow and, of course, the oval surrounding the name Paluxy River, that green streak, kind of a green color, olive green or whatever. That's the water, the river, pointed out there to you. And if you stop by and you're hanging around for a while, well, maybe you could spend a couple of nights in one of the Paluxy riverbed cabins. I've outlined that with a red rectangle up there for you so you can see where you'll have to get to stay there. And I was wondering about that, riverbed cabins. I don't know if it means the cabins have water beds or not. You know, I can't answer that question for you. You'll have to call them and ask them, I guess. Could be an interesting conversation. And if you do stay there, you could walk on over to the Stone Hut Fossil Shop in the yellow rectangle over the triangle. What am I talking about? Yellow rectangle. Maybe you could do some early Christmas shopping, right? Get some gifts ahead for next season. You can just imagine the conversation, right? So what did your husband get you for Christmas? Oh, he got me a rock. A rock? You mean a diamond? No, just this stupid rock. Well, I guess it depends on who you're buying for, but maybe the fossil shop might not be the best place to get a Christmas gift for your wife. It could be some nice stuff there. I don't know, but you just have to check it out and see. Well, anyway, here is the picture that we saw last week. This is part of the Paluxy riverbed, and you can see there two sets of tracks hardened in the rock. The larger tracks that are headed from the lower left of the picture up to a little above center right on the picture along the greenery over there, shrubbery, I guess. Those are tracks from a three-toed dinosaur. Okay. Now the smaller tracks that run right from the bottom and center and heading up slightly to the left, well, those are said by some folks to be human footprints. And, of course, the human tracks cross right over the dinosaur tracks there. And these two sets of tracks are known together in combination as the Taylor Trail. That's kind of like Andy Taylor from Mayberry, okay? Taylor. But the trail's not named for Andy. It's named for this guy, Stan Taylor. He's the one in the foreground there in the dark shirt with the dark rimmed glasses, and he's pointing out a track there. Stan started working at the Paluxy River area, riverbed and so forth, in 1969 For the longest time, there were only 2 tracks or so known to be in the riverbed in that area, I guess. But suspecting that there were more, looking at the direction of the tracks, Stan arranged to have tons of limestone removed, which then exposed more tracks. Now, this was important because it demonstrated, some claimed that those human tracks had been carved by somebody in the past. But this demonstrated that that wasn't possible because the tracks continued right on underneath the rock, you see. So no one's going to carve fake human footprints in rock as a joke or a hoax and then cover it up with a bunch of rocks. That's kind of dumb. Okay, they were legitimate natural tracks preserved in the rock, and they looked like human prints. Now, this photo of Stan is from 1970, I think, and he's pointing to some of the newly uncovered tracks that they found under that limestone. I do recall hearing about some of this back in the 70s or late 70s, early 80s or whatever. I heard about there being human tracks found alongside some dinosaur tracks out there in the world somewhere. I didn't know that it was Glen Rose, Texas. I didn't know it was the bedrock of the Paluxy River or Stan Taylor or any of the details we're looking at tonight. But I did think at the time, I can recall thinking, wow, what a cool discovery that is. You know, if that's true, that's pretty cool. So the modern creationist movement was really hitting its stride in the 1970s. The 1961 publication of Henry M. Morris and John C. Whitcomb's book, The Genesis Flood, boldly proclaimed an alternative, scientifically based concept that complemented what the Bible was saying about origins and about the flood and about how things happened. And the Genesis flood is a key format, a catastrophic event. You know, we've talked about that here a good bit. It's that catastrophic event that led to all the formation of the rock layers and the fossils and everything. And by that time, of course, by the 1960s, of course, the notions of evolution in both biology and geology, they were well ensconced in the public's minds. The atheist Madalyn Murray O'Hair, went to the Supreme Court in a case to have prayer and Bible study removed from the public schools and everything. And of course, public schools were originally started so kids in the United States or in the colonies or whatever in America could read the Bible for themselves. That was the whole plan. Anyway, those who held to belief in the Bible, of course, felt that the evolutionary explanation that Charles Darwin had put out there couldn't possibly be true. But until Morris and Whitcomb's book came out, you see, there really wasn't anywhere to turn to get a truly scientific kind of response to Darwinian ideas. Everybody was just sort of going along with the flow. Another creationist scientist by the name of Duane Gish hit the presses in 1973 with his now classic book, Evolution, The Fossils Say No. Dr. Gish's primary argument in his book, and in lectures he delivered later, was that the fossil record showed no evidence at all of any transitional forms, forms halfway between two types of animals, like somewhere between cats and dogs. It could be a dat and a cog, or nobody had anything like that. There wasn't anything being found like that in any of the species or the families or the genus of any of these things. Those transitional forms, though, according to evolutionary theory, would have absolutely had to have existed if there was to have been any sort of evolutionary progression from one kind of an animal to another kind. In other words, the linchpin of evolution itself was wholly unsupported by what was found in the fossil record. It's not just that there were missing links, folks. Whole chains were entirely missing. All the fossils also appeared to be fully formed. You didn't have any developing things that were going to later be like maybe wings or fins or anything like that on any of or legs or whatever. Everything's fully formed. There's no partial bodily structures that are on their way to becoming one thing and another, which is kind of a weird situation anyway. I mean, I don't understand, if a lizard is going to become a bird, all right? Birds fly. Lizards generally do not fly, right? They don't have wings. They crawl on the ground. Just to develop wings, okay, there's going to have to be a slow development of some kind of appendage that's not necessarily going to fit into the feet process there, or if it does, then the lizard is slowly losing a couple of feet, and they're getting wider so that there are forms for development of bones that are going to sustain the structure of wings upon which feathers, not scales, are going to have to grow. That's a lot of change. And somewhere in between, you're going to have this lizard who can't fly yet, but he's got this widened thing. What's it going to do? When he's trying to run away from the large reptile that's going to eat him or whatever, all right, or a mammal or whatever it is, he's going to be slowed down, while the rest of the lizards who haven't got that deformity are going to escape because they still have really good legs and can run. This guy's going to have wind resistance as he tries to run, or it's going to get caught on things. If that ever developed, they would die out. I mean, and you'd have to do that for a long time to get to the point where it could actually be functional wings and stuff. Stuff like that really poses a lot of problems for this whole theory. And nothing in the fossil record supports any of that. This whole thing with the creation scientist coming along was like a light bulb had been changed within the American church. Everything just brightened up. There was a shot in the arm kind of effect. These new creation scientists infused new life into the minds of Bible seminaries and colleges. Professors there began to talk about all kinds of things. The 1970s saw an explosion of Christian secondary and elementary schools across the nation. Private Christian schools started popping up everywhere. And the creationist movement had been a primary part of the impetus to get back to Christian education. If we can fight this Darwin thing, we can educate kids the way we want them to be educated. That whole mindset came out of this creationist thing. And right in the middle of all this, there's Stan Taylor, uncovering a trackway in Glen Rose, Texas, which seemed to show fossilized human footprints alongside of dinosaur prints in the bedrock of the Paluxy River. Perhaps it would only be a matter of time before the theory of evolution itself would just go extinct, kind of like the dinosaurs did, right? In their 1994 book, Texas Tracks and Artifacts, authors Robert F. Helfenstein and Jerry D. Roth write about the reaction of creationists to these unusual trackways. They write, many creationists who became aware of the human-like tracks found along the Paluxy River were quick to recognize the significance of their association with dinosaur tracks. The large size of many of the tracks caused some skepticism. In other words, the human-like tracks were larger than the average human foot. But the Bible was quite clear in its statements that in those days giants lived on the earth, Genesis 6:4. Many relied on the word of expert witnesses who had seen the tracks or on the written reports of the tracks. So it was sort of in the idea that there's a once removed or more twice removed or whatever from the actual situation for most people. Those who traveled to Texas to see the tracks were often disappointed if they only went to the state park, since the official position of park personnel was that no human-like tracks existed in the park. Parks are infamous for totally going with, of course, the evolution narrative and not talking about any of that kind of stuff that creationists talk about when they show up in their parks, like at Grand Canyon National Park. We talked a little bit about that last time. Anyway, those who knew of other track locations in the Paluxy area were also disappointed at times because of the unpredictable nature of the river level itself. Flash flooding occurs at times when there are local heavy rainstorms. And when the river is high, most of the tracks are covered. Even at normal levels, Many tracks are underwater, and only during extended dry spells does the river drop to a level where the Taylor site is easily observed. So it's kind of hard to get there to look for these human prints, or to see them when you get there. The timing has to be kind of right for you. In general, it says, they say, the variety of locations which showed human-like tracks gave many creationists a high level of confidence in the authenticity of the evidence for coexistence of humans and dinosaurs. So this is a big deal, okay? To many creationists, this evidence looked very promising for their viewpoint. Now, here's the thing. A few years ago, I came across a controversy. Of course, this whole thing is controversial anyway. But this is kind of a personal controversy that happened all over a single track in the Taylor Trail, and specifically one of the tracks believed by creationists to be human. The tracks in the human trackway were numbered by the scientists doing the investigation there, and they were numbered relative to where the human trackway crossed the dinosaur trackway. Let me show you here what I mean. Now here you got a picture of the human trackway there. You can see the word dinosaur in a yellow rectangle up there at the top, and along with that yellow box, you'll also see two yellow arrows there. Each yellow arrow is pointing toward a dinosaur footprint. So that's part of the dinosaur trackway that crosses the human trackway. Okay, so you can see the dinosaur, was walking from left to right, and that the dinosaur trail travels roughly along that angle that's indicated by the orientation of that yellow box that's labeled dinosaur, kind of a heading uphill as we move to the left sort of thing. The alleged human trackway, because of the posture of the photographer, runs straight up and down in the picture. That's what the photographer was trying to get the picture of. And you'll see that I've numbered each of the tracks. Well, I didn't number them. I just put the numbers that they have by the tracks in those little green boxes there. You'll notice that the track that is right at the intersection of the two trackways, the human track there, is numbered +1. From there to the top of the picture, moving on out in the direction that the tracks are going, you'll see tracks +2 and +3, and it goes on +4, +5, and so forth. Heading downward from the track +1, you'll see 3 tracks as well. It's -1, -2, and -3. So, from the human track at the intersection of the two trackways and beyond the dinosaur trackway, those human tracks are given plus numbers, while the tracks leading up to the dinosaur trackway are in a countdown fashion using negative numbers, okay? Now, the controversial track that I want to discuss with you is not that one, -3. It is actually just behind track -3. It's not in the picture here. I've put -3 in that red rectangle at the bottom of the picture. So the track's not visible in the photo here, but what I'm going to show you next will let you see the position of the track we want to look at. Track number -3, letter B. So it complements and is very closely associated with our -3 here. The -3 is actually a left footprint, a print of a left foot, and -3B, which we'll see in a little while, is a right footprint. Okay, so that sort of tells you why they're put together there. Now, here on this diagram, the tracks themselves, okay, they're not to scale or anything here. They're just printed on there to demonstrate. It's probably a common thing, just run over again and again and again to show where the tracks are. That's not the size of the tracks relative to each other or anything, okay? The point of this diagram is to show the position of the tracks in the trackways they make. And you'll see there's other trackways going here. There's a dinosaur trackway coming back and crossing the path, heading in a different direction than the one that we're have been looking at so far. The solid black tracks there are the alleged human tracks. And you can see the same numbering system that I was talking about, right? On this diagram, there's the +1, +2, and +3. And +3, or +1 rather, is right where the trail intersects with the dinosaur trail. And of course, you can see -3 indicated by the red arrow that I put on there. And our controversial track is indicated by the green arrow. Negative track, or track -3B. Okay, that's the green arrow. Now here is a close-up photo of -3B itself. The letter R below that tells us, on that tag you see there, the letter R tells us that this is the right foot. Now I'm pretty sure that the meaning of H-T at the top of that card or whatever, I'm pretty sure that's in reference to the first letters of the names of the two men who worked on this trail. Stan Taylor would be the letter T there. I'm not sure who Mr. H was. I took a cursory examination trying to figure out who he was, and I think I saw a name associated with Stan somewhere, but I couldn't find it in time for this. So we just got Mr. H there. And that H changes to somebody else a little bit later on. So anyway, now the human-like print that you see there, what's going on there, the human-like print is actually inside a larger dinosaur track. The human, if it was a human, stepped inside of a dinosaur track and left an impression within that. That means it was muddy for both of those critters to go through there, the dinosaur and the man, which means they live together. All right. Let me show you a photo of the human-like print here of -3B with the human footprint highlighted. Okay, there you go. Now you get a better look at what the human track that's there. You can see the foot more clearly here. The toes are more visible, right? I can see at least 4 toes there, and if there's one scrunched in between the big toe and the third toe there, that's probably all 5 toes, okay? Let me go back and forth here between the two a few times so you can kind of see this. You got this over here, and then you got that, okay? And just to do it again for you so you can get a sense of what's what on this as compared to that, okay? It shifts down a little bit, but still I think you can see the comparison between the two and find that track fairly readily now. As I said, this track is inside of a dinosaur track. In this photo, it's the dinosaur track that is highlighted. If you'll notice, going down to the bottom, just left of center there, about the bottom 4th maybe of the photo, there's a dark spot there. That's the left side of the heel of the human print, and it is actually outside of the dinosaur print. You'll see the dinosaur print comes down to a point at the very bottom of that's the heel of the dinosaur. It's got like a funky looking foot with 3 toes at one end and a pointed heel at the back. And it comes down to a point, and the human print is outside of it there. Okay, part of it anyway. Again, I'll go back and forth between the two slides here of the highlighted human track and the highlighted dinosaur track. That'll help you see that a little better. That kind of is pretty nice there. Whoop, whoop. And we'll do it one more time. Now, to see more clearly how these two tracks interact, take a look at this. This is an artist's sketch which utilizes the contours of the ground. These tracks are depressions, after all, somewhat, which helps you see the depressed areas of both footprints. With this sketch, you can more easily see how the human print has stepped inside of the funky-looking dinosaur print on the left side of the dinosaur track. And so that kind of helps you see that a little bit. I really like that picture there to help get the detail out. Now here's another way to look at this human track, focusing on the toe area, the upper part of the forward part of the right foot. In this slide, you'll see the front portion of the foot. The toes are the emphasis. They're a little difficult to see here, but someone did a rough outline of the toes in blue, and you should be able to count at least 4 toes And if they put that little squiggle mark in there, that might be a fifth toe between the big toe and the third toe or whatever. So again, let me go back and forth between the two so you can sort of get the sense of this. Now you can probably imagine that all this talk from the creationists about how they had found dinosaur tracks and human tracks together, you can imagine this caused quite a stir in the evolutionist camp. Now, the man that you see on the screen right here is a creation scientist. His name is Dr. Don Patton. Now, here he's giving a presentation on the record of the rocks. That's the name of his talk. And Dr. Patton has been based out of Texas. He's one of the key creationists involved with the dinosaur tracks at Glen Rose. There are several men who were involved with that. I actually met one guy who spent some time down there with them at one time, just a few years ago, at a kind of a campground conference kind of thing. And he came with his son, and they presented some evidence of footprints and so forth. And the older fellow, he was in his 80s, he talked about, he was a chemist actually, and he had worked with these guys. And so I stopped to talk with him. It was really kind of neat to touch base with somebody that knew these older fellows like Don Patton. He knew Don Patton. Carl Bach was another man that's down that way, and he knew him, and there's some others that he knew. It was really kind of cool. So anyway, he's here giving a talk, presentation, Dr. Patton is, and after giving a little bit of the history of the discovery of the Taylor Trail, a little bit more than what we did here this evening, Dr. Patton says this, that there was an evolutionist by the name of Glenn Kuban, Kuban, I hope I'm saying it right, Glenn Kuban. He came to the Paluxy River site because he wanted to take a look at these alleged human footprints, okay? And Dr. Patton said that Kuban came up with his own explanation. That's what he wanted to do, okay? That he wanted to say, these can't be dinosaur or human footprints with dinosaur prints, okay? So there must be some explanation. So he came up with an explanation, and Dr. Patton said it probably won Kuban the Humanist of the Year award. I think he was being a little facetious there. I don't know if they did, but in other words, it made him very popular with his crowd, people he associated with on the evolutionist humanist side. So according to Dr. Patton, Kuban said that the so-called human prints were actually dinosaur prints that had been modified by erosion. All right? The elongated prints labeled B here were, as Kuban explained, they were changed by erosion over time, and eventually they looked like the shape in the lower right corner down there. And since that looks somewhat like a human print, he was saying that probably explained what confused folks about these prints in the first place. And they identified them wrongly as human. The so-called human tracks are merely eroded dinosaur tracks, and that's what we're looking at, folks, and so forth. Now, in response to this, Dr. Patton offered this photo as evidence for his refutation of Glenn Kuban's eroded dinosaur track theory. Now, this is one of the better casts that Stan Taylor made of a human print at the Paluxy River. As Dr. Patton said, the detail of this cast is very sharp. It's very clean. It's pretty obvious, obviously is looking like a human footprint. It's very hard to imagine, looking at this, how a larger dinosaur track could erode and wear away only to leave the fine detail of a human footprint exhibited by this track here. That's really quite a challenge for the eroded track idea. Dr. Patton said that the track which really persuaded him that these were human prints was in fact our track negative 3B, which we've already looked at, right? This is the photo with the human print highlighted. Understand, it doesn't appear like that normally. This is a highlight that's done to show the footprint in a better manner. Dr. Patton said that some had claimed that these tracks were carved, as we said a little while ago. In other words, these tracks were faked. Others, like Glenn Kuban, said, "Oh no, it's erosion. They're not human footprints at all. They're dinosaur prints that eroded." But Don Patton says, now when you have both a dinosaur print and a human print superimposed over each other like this, we're kind of somewhere in the middle between fakes and erosions. Okay, it's not. You can't really call it either. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle had Sherlock Holmes, his famous fictional detective, say that when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. It was at this point in his presentation where Dr. Patton raised the bar, so to speak, on this controversy. Maybe in quite literal way he raised the bar, centering the focus on this very print, HT-3BR. Dr. Patton said that he and his team were in Nashville at one time, giving a presentation on creationism, and as part of that, he showed the audience the data and so forth that they had on this particular track. Some of the displays we had tonight probably were part of that presentation. And he also said that Glenn Kuban was in attendance. I'm sure Dr. Patton was very familiar with Glenn Kuban by that time, and probably wondering, what in the world is he doing here in Nashville right now? The next day, after this weekend or whatever, Kuban was seen at, back it up here, Brian. Kuban was seen at the Paluxy River site with a long iron bar. Somebody witnessed that. According to Dr. Patton, his office had gotten several calls on that day saying that Kuban had been seen at the riverbed with this iron bar. And Dr. Patton said that by the time they got there, Kuban was gone, and -3B, the track, now looked like this. Did Glenn Kuban actually vandalize fossil evidence that suggests humans and dinosaurs lived at the same time? That seems like a rather incredible charge to make, to say that someone would do that. But yet, the photographed print here definitely appears to have been damaged. In the center of that, you can see holes and chips, and it looks like someone did beat it with a bar or something, like a digging iron. Now, I just want to flip between this photo and the before image a few times for you here. One word about the MC up there. I don't know, but apparently someone else came and did some work on the Taylor track. I think TY may well still mean Taylor. Don't know about that, but it's still it's the same track. So just going back and forth here. There's the before, and again with the highlighted footprint, just to remember that that's what we're seeing there. And then there's this, and then we go back again. Looks rather smooth, not beaten up, and then it's like this. Dr. Patton's ministry has a report on this incident in which the following is written, and I want to read this to you. And as I read it, you'll see the picture that the report references. The above fossil footprint, -3B, is in the bed of the Paluxy River near Glen Rose, Texas. It is one of a 14-track sequence called the Taylor Trail. The tracks are consistently 11.5 inches in length. Now, in my mind, that's a long foot. That's a big foot. It's bigger than the average human foot today, but it's not astronomical. I thought maybe they were talking about something really huge. All right, 11.5. You can get size 12 shoes to fit that, right? So it's 11.5 inches in length with consistent alternating rights and lefts, okay? And they are among, and in this particular case, with this photo, as you can see here, they are also within dinosaur tracks. The report goes on. On August 12, 1989, Dr. Don Patton spoke at a creation conference in Dayton, Tennessee. He presented compelling evidence that both human and dinosaur tracks were present at the Taylor Trail, including these pictures that you see on the left there. Two well-known evolutionists were present. One of those is Glenn Kuban, right? But he doesn't mention him in this report by name. Two well-known evolutionists were present, and at least one was conspicuously disturbed by this presentation. So you can just sort of imagine, and I've seen this happen when creationists speak. There was one case where I was at a place where a creationist was speaking, and there was one of the pastors of the church was actually up in the balcony, and he was just sort of sitting up there, and nobody else was up there, and he was just kind of squirming around, shaking his head, saying no, 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 and very almost, he didn't shout, but his head was yelling, if you know what I mean, just back and forth. And you got the impression he was almost trying to intimidate the speaker, which I thought was rather rude. But, you know, I've seen this kind of thing before. And that was the pastor, one of the pastors at the church. Anyway, so this guy is conspicuously disturbed by the presentation. That's something that I think is very common. If someone vehemently disagrees, you're going to see it in their responses and their actions. So one was conspicuously disturbed by the presentation. The two of them, flew to Dallas the next morning and went immediately to the Paluxy River. And it was reliably reported that they were in the river that afternoon with an iron bar. 3 days before they were in the river, the footprint was observed looking like the above picture, the one we saw earlier. 3 days after they were in the river, it was observed looking like the picture below right, as we've also seen already. And then it adds this little comment which I thought was important. Clear photography was not possible till the water went down several months later. Remember, we talked about needing a very dry spell to see this trackway. It wasn't possible until the water went down several months later when this photograph was taken. I was glad I read that, because when I looked at this photograph, I thought, okay, yeah, there's obviously been some change to this whole thing, in that someone looks like they could have perpetrated. But did they clean up all the rocks that they chipped away? You know, did they remove all that and clean it up or something? Because you didn't see anything. Plus, while it looks like something was done here, it's not exactly clean cuts, you know, breaks and that kind of thing. But if it was underwater for several months, okay, that's going to smooth it out a little bit. And that made a little bit more sense here. So anyway, for what that's worth. Now, of course, Glenn Kuban denies that he did anything to this track back in 1989. A person on one video that I saw as I was looking into this, talking about this iron bar incident, offered an explanation in Kuban's defense, saying he was probably carrying the usual kinds of equipment that a geologist or a paleontologist or an archaeologist or whatever would use on the job. He had long tools or whatever, so he wasn't carrying an iron bar. And I sort of think to myself, well, an iron bar would be a very useful tool for an archaeologist or a paleontologist or a geologist or whatever out there who's trying to get samples. But this guy says he wasn't carrying an iron bar. It was an instrument of some kind. Though the tool or instrument he had could really have looked like a long digging iron. Okay. And here's the weird thing about this guy's defensive statement. He's trying to help, and he's actually hurting, I think. Number one, the guy defending Kuban he's not denying that Kuban was at the site. You know, Kuban could have said, I wasn't there. He could have said that, and you know, whether maybe he wasn't, you know, that kind of thing. But he's not denying that Kuban was at the site. And number two, he's also not denying that Kuban was carrying something long that could be mistaken for an iron bar. So it's sort of like, you know, sure he was there. Sure he had a long thing, but it wasn't an iron bar, I tell you, you know, that kind of thing. I don't know. So anyway, on another video that I found online that was made in 2014, Glenn Kuban, which you see there, is at the Paluxy River site, and he's explaining what the human tracks actually are, that they are dinosaur tracks. And Glenn says that had the tracks been properly cleaned, one could see the three-toed impressions that the dinosaur had made. Now, in this picture, Glenn is kneeling beside one of the alleged human tracks. And I can see, looking at this, discoloration at the front end of the track, which is somewhat shaped like a pointed toe. You look at it, it looks almost like, the Washington Monument or something coming to a point or whatever up there at the top. And that might be the center pointed toe of a three-toed dinosaur. Could be that, could be. I don't see connections real well to the larger track area, but okay, maybe it is. And there could be one to the right of it there, pointing off in a different direction. Looks a little mottled itself there in the bottom, but that could be one. But I don't see one to the left of the center toe. Where's the third one? That's not visible anywhere that I can see. I can only see two possible toes here. Somebody else can see another toe there. I'd be glad to hear about it. And also, please note this. It's kind of hard to tell in there, but down where Kuban's right hand is, at the heel of the foot, in that heel portion, the track is a lot deeper into the rock than is that discolored toe area, which almost looks like it's superficial, like it's on or near the surface. And now in the video, here's what Kuban claims. He claims that the dinosaur was apparently not walking in a usual dinosaur-like fashion here, okay, which must produce tracks where the foot is pressed completely down into the rock, like other tracks in the trackway around there. This particular dinosaur, he says, must have walked, and these are his words, somewhat like a human. Okay. And that's why it looks like a human track, is somewhat like a human. Now, Glenn Kuban, so far as I understand it presently, he's the premier evolutionist expert on the Paluxy River dinosaur tracks. He went to do the work on these human prints to show that they're not dinosaur or not human prints, they're dinosaur prints. And here he claims that a dinosaur can walk somewhat like a human. I don't know if he's ever seen one do that. That would be an interesting story. But that's why he says the heel section of what he's calling dinosaur tracks, why it's pressed more deeply into the rock. Like the heel came down first and then just kind of kept going like that with the heel down, and the toes hardly made an imprint at all. There's some impression there, but not much. Anyway, now here's the thing. You might recall earlier we learned tonight that Glenn Kuban had said back in the 80s previously that the footprints looked human because the dinosaur tracks had eroded. That picture that Don Patton showed on his presentation. Now, in 2014 here, in this video, what this still picture is from, he's saying the dinosaurs walked funny and produced tracks that look like human tracks. So which is it now? The pointy toes didn't erode. The dinosaur simply didn't press his toes deep down into the mud. All right, what Glenn's free to change his mind on it, I guess, and come up with a new theory, but I'm kind of at a loss to follow his reasoning here. How did he get from one to the other? I mean, it really sounds like he's doing a lot of guesswork. And it could be this, could be that, and he didn't really come to any firm, solid kind of explanation for any of this. And of course, as an evolutionist, he's predisposed to say that these prints must be dinosaur prints. All the other prints around here are dinosaur prints. These must be dinosaur prints. They don't look like dinosaur prints because they eroded. Or no, because the dinosaur walked like a human. All right. In his worldview, they can't be anything other than dinosaur prints. He cannot accept that they would be human. They have to be something else, and he needs a reason for it. And so do a lot of other people in his camp, okay? Certainly not human prints, okay? Does Glenn Kuban have any explanation for what these two photos then show? All right, according to Glenn, the appearance of toe imprints in the photo on the left, and this is not the highlighted one, this is just the standard photo, is actually the result of a trick of the light. Looks like there could be toes there, but there's not really. The light was just funny on that photograph when that photo was taken. So, I got a question for him. Is the appearance of the deep gouges in the bottom of the footprint on the right there, which looks like somebody could have made them with a digging iron, is that also likewise just a mere trick of the light that gives that deep impression there? Much deeper than the other one that looks like a footprint to me? I'm just saying. Now, I'm not going to say the word lying, but here's the thing, folks. One of these two men has been playing very fast and loose with the truth. Both men have very different worldviews, opposing worldviews. One believes that life on Earth, including the dinosaurs and humans, was all created by God. The other one believes that life arose through some kind of process involving changes over long ages of time that turned one kind of animal into a different kind of animal eventually, and that happened lots of times and eventually got us to where we are today or whatever. Obviously, I'm not able to say exactly which one has misrepresented the facts in this interesting case. I am going to share with you one more statement from Don Patton, which he has on his website. It's www.bible.ca, which I believe is the tag on for domain area for Canada websites. I'm pretty sure that's what that is. I don't think it's Central America. I think it's Canada. Okay, just kidding. But it's Canada, I'm sure. I don't know if he's a Canadian that lives, but he sounds like a Texan when he talks. I don't know. Anyway, Patton proposed a polygraph examination, known popularly as a lie detector exam, And I'm going to read some of what he writes here on his website and show you some pictures to go along with it, just to kind of give it some context. Glenn Kuban, he says, this is a younger Glenn Kuban in this picture with the three-toed dinosaur print there, probably from Paluxy River area. Glenn Kuban has stubbornly opposed the Paluxy evidence, claiming that there are no human-like details, and at the same time claiming that the notches, quote-unquote, that suggest toes were manufactured, fakes. He has even claimed to have seen it done. I know that these claims are false. I emphatically deny them. He has also accused me of fabricating a rumor about him that he intentionally damaged fossil tracks, destroying evidence. That charge that he's accusing him is false, although I do suspect that he is not innocent in the matter. Approximately 10 years ago, I proposed a polygraph exam to one of Glenn Kuban's co-workers who was complaining about the implications of material on our website, which is pictured here in the picture. And I suggested that Kuban take a polygraph examination questioning him about his activities at the Paluxy. Specifically, did you damage or deface any track evidence at the Paluxy? Do you have knowledge of anyone who did? Were you there when it happened? Were you complicit in any way? I stated that if he did pass such an exam by a qualified examiner, I would pay for the test and pay him an equal amount for restitution and post a correction on the website. I specified that a qualified examiner would be a member of the American Polygraph Association and licensed by the state. I repeated the offer to Kuban face-to-face in the Paluxy riverbed in the year 2000. He was disrupting our excavation efforts with his loud railing, so he's there creating a disturbance while those guys are trying to work. He was also almost enthusiastic about the offer to take this polygraph, right, until he heard my specifications. Nevertheless, he promised me that he would take the test. Maybe he did. If so, I haven't heard about it, and he certainly hasn't asked for my reimbursement. I was thoroughly disgusted with his comments circulated recently and determined to take the initiative. So this is written right after Don Patton gets his own polygraph test done. And that's what he's saying. There was some comments that Kuban was making, and whatever they were, it disgusted Patton, and so he thought, well, I'm just going to go ahead and get this polygraph done myself. So he says, I searched and found what appears to be the most experienced, qualified polygraph examiner in the Dallas area. I paid the $500 and took the test. I suggested using the questions Kuban posted recently. So Kuban must have put some questions out on a website somewhere and said, these are the questions I'd like Don Patton to answer in a polygraph or whatever. The examiner made some minor adjustments for preciseness and inclusiveness, because I had suggested several more specific questions, but he said that it would be best to stay with the basic questions Kuban suggested, and assured me that the questions were worded in such a way that my specifics would be included. The questions were as follows, with my answers in parentheses. Regarding your statements about the Paluxy evidence, do you intend to answer my questions truthfully? Yes. Did you ever misrepresent Paluxy evidence? No. Did you alter in any way evidence to make false conclusions at the Paluxy site? No. Have you intentionally lied about the evidence you found at the Paluxy site? No. The results were expressed by the examiner as follows. So this is from the guy who did the examination on Mr. Patton. The testing format used with Mr. Patton was a Raskin or Utah polygraph testing technique. Means nothing to me. But he does say a little bit about it. He says, this technique consists of 3 test charts and a number stimulus exam. Again, that means nothing to me. The 3 test charts are numerically graded. The numerical hand scoring of the test results can produce scores at a level of +6 or greater, indicating the polygraph subject is considered to be truthful or no deception indicated. A score of -6 or greater, like -7, -8, -9, indicate a score result of deception indicated. The guy's lying, okay? Scores falling between +6 and -6 are considered inconclusive. After 3 test charts and a number of stimulus tests were administered, an analysis of the photograph or polygraph charts was made, and in my professional opinion, Mr. Patton is being truthful in all his answers to the relevant test questions. I would also conclude, based on the polygrams, that Mr. Patton did not alter any evidence at the Paluxy site, nor has he developed any false conclusions about the site. Mr. Patton's test charts were numerically graded using a Raskin or Utah technique, producing a +14. This score is well within the limits of being considered truthful or no deception indicated polygraph subject. The exam was conducted by Joe D. Morris, polygraph examiner, Texas State License number 809. And you can see it on the May 1st, 2007 report given to Mr. Don Patton, 813 Trails Parkway, Garland, Texas. He doesn't live in Canada. Anyway, what can we conclude out of all this, folks? Now, we can't say with certainty that Glenn Kuban deliberately destroyed evidence that humans and dinosaurs were living at the same time. And I have to admit, my humble and very basic review of this case certainly wasn't thorough at all. I didn't check out all the websites, what they had to say, back and forth, back and forth. And to be honest, my purpose was really not to try the we report, you decide approach anyway. I didn't want to cover everything and let you come up with your own conclusions. You can draw them based on what we've looked at. There might be more that can be said. I'm sure there is more that can be said. A couple points can be made, though, in conclusion. All of these are just simply my personal opinion here. I do find it suspicious that Mr. Kuban ultimately and apparently did not submit to a polygraph test. There could be a number of reasons why. Maybe he felt that no matter what would happen, he would fail for whatever reason. I don't know. Some people are scared of those. They don't like them. But according to Patton, he sounded enthusiastic when the idea was initially suggested, so I'm not sure about that. If he had done nothing amiss, I mean, if he didn't do anything to the track at all, well, then where's the harm in taking the polygraph test? All right, take the test, pass it on the questions asked. Clear the air on the accusations made against you. It's a positive outcome. You win. It's more convincing for the people that you have tried to, that you've been working for, essentially. The other evolutionists who wanted somebody to examine this, you had done it, came with your conclusions. They liked it. This would even underscore it, and they'd like it even better. The only thing is, what if those accusations that were made, what if they have some merit? What if he actually did do something? Maybe he did have some testing equipment out there, and he's like, oh, let's just test this here. Oops, that was a little hard. Oh, I messed up that human track. Ha, ha, ha. I don't know. I'm just saying. It does seem hard to imagine, really, that someone would destroy prints which they themselves believe to be millions of years old. Any kind of evidence like that, any kind of tracks destroying things, even if it's just one thing, seems kind of weird. And, of course, this argues against Dr. Patton's accusation that Glenn Kuban did exactly that. On the other hand, I've been studying this creation-evolution debate for a long time myself. Probably back at the time these guys were, going back and forth in 1989 over things. I was into it back then and looking into evidence myself. And I can say that from what I've observed over the years, there's almost an obsessive need by some on the evolution side of things to absolutely stamp out all vestiges of biblical creationism in any way they possibly can. Anything to do away with it. Back around the time that Don Patton was challenging Glenn Kuban to take a polygraph exam, Debbie and I made our first trip to the Creation Museum in Kentucky. I guess it was about 15 years ago. And we parked near the Creation building. It was, kind of a slow day. Weekends they were packed, right? In the summertime. This was in the fall. And I saw a security trailer that was set up right outside of the museum. As we're getting out of the car, I can see this security thing here. And they had dogs, okay? They had trained dogs there. So I walked up to the guy at the window, and I asked, okay, I said, so why do you have, he may have been standing outside, doesn't matter, but I walked up to talk to him. I said, so why do you have a security detail with dogs for a museum? I just really want to know what the deal is. There's a reason, I'm sure. And the security guard says, do you have any idea how many bomb threats we receive each week? I wonder if the Smithsonian, ever gets bomb threats, or the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. Do they get bomb threats? Or the Natural History Museum in Chicago, do they get bomb threats? The Louvre in Paris, the British Museum, do they get bomb threats all the time? I guess if there are atheists who are willing to threaten to blow up a museum started by creationists, well, I guess then there's not really much difference then in imagining a hardened evolutionist busting up a fossil track that looks like a human print inside of a dinosaur print. Makes sense to me. It's really not outside the realm of the possible, anyway. It fits the pattern. In the mid-'80s, Glenn Kuban did succeed in convincing some major creationist organizations, this is all before the destroyed track and everything, to not use the Paluxy tracks as evidence that humans and dinosaurs lived together. Here's what had happened. In the late 70s, a group of folks associated with both the Paluxy creationists and some other folks connected to the Institute for Creation Research that had been started by Henry M. Morris, who we saw earlier in the slideshow. The Institute for Creation Research and some of the ones of the Paluxy creationists, they teamed up to produce a documentary about the human footprints and dinosaur footprints side by side at the Paluxy River. I mean, this is information you want to get out. If this is true or possibly true, this is worth putting out there so people and Christians can know and that kind of thing. The 1973 documentary was entitled Footprints in Stone. In fact, Stan Taylor, whose name is immortalized by the Taylor Trail that he uncovered, he was the driving force behind getting this done, and ICR was helping with the filming, with equipment, and also distribution of the documentary when it was finished. But then John Morris, who was Henry Morris' son, and also worked for the Institute of Creation Research. John Morris had a chat with Glenn Kuban while at Biloxi. And based upon what was said there, John Morris made the decision to pull distribution of the film. And they issued a statement, ICR did, saying that creationists ought not use the Biloxi prints as evidence for creation. Now, because there has been such a controversy as this over this track and accusations of both sides about things, these tracks this human trail might not be the smoking gun evidence the creationists once thought that it was, But I still find the evidence very interesting. I still find the overall story very interesting. Take a look at this sign on Highway 205. It's a touristy sign, okay, Glen Rose, Texas. Photo from 1968. And it says there at the very top, Giant Men Tracks. Giant Men Tracks. Who wouldn't want to stop and see the Giant Men Tracks? Oh, Daddy, can we please stop and see the Giant Men Tracks? Daddy, please. Daddy, please. I guess it's a Texas accent, right? And I can't help but think, what if? What if they are human prints? Or like the sign suggests, prints perhaps of the pre-flood Nephilim, the giants who were in the earth in those days, as Genesis 6:4 says, right before the flood. Sometimes I think we're too quick to lay things aside. I get it if I ran a creationist organization and there was lots of money involved and donors who were supporting you and that kind of thing. You have to take all that into consideration. You might secretly believe they're human prints, but you know what? We better just leave it aside because it's fraught with too much controversy. But I'm not doing that. So I think that the information is still worth considering. After all, like a famous detective who followed a lot of footprints in his day probably, once said this: when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. And I think it's possible to still get pretty close to the truth on this. Probably not this side of heaven, but it's still worth looking at and taking into consideration. My viewpoint says humans and dinosaurs did live together. God created them. Land animals and men on the same day. Day number 6. If anybody has a problem believing God can create things in 6 days, well then that's a different issue, isn't it? But it would be possible that 2 sets of tracks could possibly happen in a circumstance where both kinds of creatures made by God lived at the same time. Did they live in the same places? How were things before the flood? Maybe dinosaurs lived in one region of the great big continent and humans lived in another. How many humans were there? Well, could have been a lot, but maybe they all kind of stayed together. All kinds of interesting questions can spin off of this. But I hope you enjoyed this look tonight. It's more than just the evidence here. It's the story also showing the tension between creationism and evolutionism and the beliefs on both sides and how heated debate and discussion can actually get to the point sometimes of being highly irrational and to do some crazy things. So thank you very much for listening. You all take care. God bless you. Have a good night. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye now.